This video is for you if you're thinking about getting a foil drive, or if you got one and now you don't know how to use it. So let's talk a little bit about gear. So what should you start with? Now, I'm currently using a Gong 90-liter inflatable board 5.0, and in my opinion is almost perfect for anybody below 80 kg, because it's inflatable, so it's extremely light, it's still quite stiff, and you don't have any reception problem between the remote and the foil drive. And if you, for example, fall on the board, it's very safe, right? There is nothing that can hurt you. So it's pretty safe, pretty light, and I recommend that this size because it's still quite compact and it's not too thick. Because if you then get something very thick, for example, like a SUP board or really something above 15 centimeter, then it becomes quite hard because there is a lot of distance between your feet and the mast, and if you've never used a foil drive, you might not be used to that feeling, right? And then in terms of mast, it's the same principle. I suggest you don't start with like a 90 centimeter mast, because then it's gonna be quite some distance between your feet and the foil. Here I'm using an 80 centimeter mast from Ketos, and I believe it's just the sweet spot, because these 80 centimeter mast plus the 3.5 centimeter pod, that's the size of the slim pod, plus the board is roughly 90 centimeter, which is what I usually pump in flat water. So for me, it's quite normal to use this mast on this board. Then, like you can see, I'm using the slim foil drive, and of course you kind of have to fit it and find your adapter here to hold the prop in place. I always recommend to disassemble the sets when you're not using it, so that you can wash it with clean water as much as possible. In terms of foil, I'm using the Ketos 1250, which is a little bit fast. Ideally, you want to try and start with something a little bit bigger, so that you have more lift and more control, and it doesn't just fly away as soon as you get out of the water. In terms of fuselage, as always, the longer, the more stable, the better to start. And then ideally, as you progress, you want to maybe switch to something a little bit shorter to just have fun. And again, in terms of tail wing, something a little bit more generous is ideal to start with, just because it's more stable. Because you're going to have a lot of forces involved, especially when you pop up and disengage the propeller, because you're going to have a lot of drag changes. So if you try and stick to a set that you're familiar with and is stable, that's really going to help. However, I do believe it's very, very simple and easy to learn foil drive. It's pretty much like e-foiling, but the difference between a foil drive and an e-foil, that's why I would never compare a foil drive to an e-foil, is that with the foil drive you have a progression, right? You know, you can you can use it as an e-foil in flat water if you're just getting started, and that's fine. But unlike an e-foil, well, where you get to a point where you're just stuck and you pretty much cannot progress anymore, with the foil drive, the journey is pretty much unlimited, because you can do so many things with it. You can learn how to pump, you can do downwinders, upwind, downwind, whatever you want to do, you can pretty much do it. That is why it's pretty nice tool. You can also surf foil with it, and you don't have to worry about popping up. You can also practice the SUP paddle up in flat water with that. You can combine the foil drive with the paddle. There's so many things that you can do that I cannot even remember them all. But yeah, the set is ready. I just need a battery and a propeller. So let's pop them on. Like I said, make sure to always pop out the can, so that you can actually clean up from salt water between the motor and the propeller. Here, as you can see, I'm using a 3-prop propeller, just because the transition between motor to foil is a little bit smoother. Make sure to always fill the 4 holes with battery grease, and once you've done that, make sure to push the battery all the way in until you can see and hear the little click. And then, most importantly, don't forget the cap, like someone. Push the cap all the way in And I always recommend to try and clip it together and make sure that it's nice and tight so that you don't lose the battery midway. All right, and that's that. You're pretty much good to go. And now let's get into the second part of this tutorial, where I'm going to show you how to use it, how to get started, and how to progress and eventually even learn how to pump with the foil drive. First off, a little bit of housekeeping with the remote controller. Of course, to turn it on, you simply press and hold the side button. And then the first thing that you want to do is to press the front button and the side button to enter the menu. And the first thing that you want to do is to decrease the power, because you don't really need all the power with such a big board, perhaps a big foil, and perhaps not a big rider weight, okay? So to navigate, you simply use the power button, and you wanna navigate to THR limit. To enter the menu, you simply press and hold. And once you are in the trigger limit menu, you just want to set this number to your body weight. So I'm 75, so let's try and set it to 75. Five, 7, 0. And then you press the front button to go back, and come back. So first off, a little bit of a safety briefing, because now you not only have a sharp foil that can potentially stab you, you also have a propeller that can potentially cut you. So make sure that whenever the propeller is outside of the water, whether you are on the shore or whether you are just floating the board upside down on the water, then make sure that the remote is turned off, okay? So you don't accidentally press the trigger and injure yourself, okay? Now, as you can see, the trigger is very modular, so it's very sensitive, and you can go very slow and very fast at the same time. Now, I don't recommend you do what I just did, so I don't recommend you just motor outside of the water, because the foil drive is simply not made for it. Now, that being said, that little premise, we wanna also make sure that we always try and fall on the opposite direction, okay? It's normal, even when you're wing foiling, you wanna always try and fall the opposite direction compared to the set, so that you don't fall on the foil accidentally. But now you have another reason why you should fall on the other side, so that you don't risk to touch the propeller. Now, foil drive is selling a specific guard that you can put around to make it safer if you're just getting started, and I recommend you use that if you've never used a foil or even an e-foil, okay? Because that just makes it way safer. But of course, the downside is that you have a little bit more drag when you're motoring and when you're popping up. With the safety stuff out of the way, then we can think about actually getting in the water or on the water. Now, just a little thing I have to mention is about the board. Now I'm using a 90-liter board, so I can pretty easily, comfortably float on it with my 75-77 kg weight. However, if you're using a smaller board, which I don't recommend at the beginning, then you wanna make sure that you start from this position with your elbows on the pad. Instead, with this board, you might as well try and start directly from this kneeling position, because again, you have flotation, so it shouldn't be a problem for you to start, and you just remove one step. But again, let's go in the water, and I'm gonna show you all these step by step live. All right, so of course you wanna go where it's a little bit deeper. It goes without saying. Of course, right now my remote is turned off. Getting deeper, it's colder. All right, I can turn it, and then only once the prop is in the water, I can press and hold the side button and turn on the remote. And then once it's really deep, I can just jump on the board. And now there are pretty much two ways to start. Either you start from this elbow position, right? Elbow on the pad position. Either you start, if you have a big enough board, from a kneeling position. Now, in this case, let me just do the thorough process, and eventually I can show you how to start from the knees as well. So from this position, you just press the trigger a little bit, and you just start, and you motor, and you just try and feel how the board behaves, because you're gonna soon realize that you have quite some lift, right? If you really press the trigger, you can already see probably the board pointing up, right? And you wanna try and keep it down. So you just motor a little bit, and if you see the board pitching up, you just slide a tiny little bit more in front, so that you keep that board down. Now, do not try and stand up at this stage, because you wanna plane before you stand up. Otherwise, you're gonna be super unstable. So, once you feel comfortable motoring around on your elbows, then you can try and stand and switch to kneeling position. So, you motor a bit more, you plane, and then you go in this kneeling position. You have to make sure that you don't sink the nose, but at the same time you don't want to lift the nose too much, right? And once you're in this position, again, you can try and press the trigger a little bit more. If you see that the nose is coming up, you just press it down, and you just really have to find the balance, right? And if you see that the foil is already lifting you, do not engage the foil at this stage. Keep it down and get comfortable riding around in this position, okay? And once you've done that, then the next step, after you're comfortable in this position, is to just bring your front foot up. So I'm goofy, so I keep pressure on the nose. I don't want the board to lift too much. I make sure that I'm planing already. You can hear probably the board splashing and chaffing on the surface, which means that I'm planing. So I'm stable and I can bring my front foot up. All right, and now again, I just try and stabilize in this position and make sure that the front foot is roughly where it's gonna be when you're gonna stand up, okay? And once you are in this position and you are stable and you are planing, then you can switch and stand up. And I just want to mention, you probably cannot see it from the camera, but I didn't press the trigger. The trigger is always steady at 62% power, okay? Now, once you're in this position, it's not very comfortable, so I want to adjust my feet placement, but do not do what I just did, what just happened. So the board started lifting, I started flying. You don't want to fly yet at this stage. You just really want to motor around while standing up on the board. But again, I'm not in a very comfortable position, so I'm gonna try and switch to a normal stance, okay? Now it's getting shallow. Let's go a little bit that way. Okay, try and look forward, try and keep dragging the board at this point. I'm just gonna adjust my feet placement to something a little bit more comfortable, but I'm gonna keep the pressure in front because I don't want the nose to lift yet, right? If you feel the nose lifting, just apply more pressure with your front foot and keep it down. You want to be very comfortable surfing like this before you try and engage the foil, okay? Now, once you're comfortable in the position, what you're gonna do, you're gonna try and gain a little bit more speed, okay? So don't try and lift the board because you're just gonna point the board up and you're gonna fly backwards. But instead, at this point, you can press the trigger a little bit more than you used to have a little bit more power, and without moving your weight, shifting your feet or anything, the board is gonna automatically go up. So again, I'm just gonna press the trigger a little bit more, and look what happens. I gain speed, and because I gain speed, I'm flying, okay? And again, you don't wanna do anything at this point. You don't want to pump, you don't want to do anything. You just want to try an e-foil, okay? So you want to find the balance, the right feet placement. You want to get comfortable flying around while still motoring. You still want to use the propeller. You still want to keep the propeller in the water You want to just get comfortable. You want to maybe adjust your feet placements a little bit. Look forward. You want to understand the feeling of turning. You want to understand the feeling of hitting the pod. When you hit the pod, as it happened a few seconds ago, you're going to really feel that there is a little bit of drag, okay? And then, once you are comfortable, it's going to probably take a couple of sessions, right? But once you're comfortable flying around, then what you want to try and do is disengage the propeller, and you're gonna officially foil, and then you can think about pumping, okay? So if it happens what just happened, right? So you saw the propeller getting out of the water. So in that case, what you want to do, you don't want to release the trigger, because if you release the trigger, a little wave, if you release the trigger, you're gonna have a lot of on-off, okay? And you don't want that. You want to have a nice and steady ride. So instead of using the trigger, you adjust the balance by applying less or more pressure on your front foot, okay? So as I'm talking, I'm not messing around with the trigger. My trigger has been steady since I got up, okay? I'm not pushing more, pressing more the trigger. I'm still at 60%, right? I started at 60%, I'm still at 65%, okay? So, now, once you're comfortable riding around, e-foiling around, what you want to try and do is to disengage the propeller and officially get up on foil. Now, the best way to do that is by hauling. So you want to ollie, okay? You want to disengage the propeller all at once, because if you don't do that, you kind of have to pump your way out of that situation, and it's not simple, because you're going to hit the propeller, you're going to hit the motor, and if you're not an efficient pump foiler, it's going to be very, very hard. So, what's the solution? You ollie. So, before you hop, before you relieve your weight off the board, what you want to do, you want to gain speed, so potentially you're going to have a full throttle on the trigger, and then you want to point the board down before you leave your weight. I'm going to show you now. So you adjust your feet placement, you're comfortable, you're stable, you accelerate, you get low on your knees, and then you go down and up, and then you just glide, okay? And then you can motor away once again, okay? I'm gonna do it again because it was a little bit clumsy, not very clean. It's getting a bit windy. Again, you get low on your knees, and after you get low on your knees, you want to press with your front foot and then relieve your weight. I'm gonna do it now. So you are comfortable, all right? Low on your knees, more speed, hop, and you just glide. And then you motor again. You don't wanna pump, you don't wanna do anything, you just wanna ollie out, ollie up, this hop, relieve your weight, and then just stabilize and glide. Don't try to pump. You wanna do this a dozen of times before you even try and pump. You wanna really be comfortable disengaging the propeller all at once and then gliding. And then it's also important because this exercise is gonna help you practice the transition between gliding and motoring once again, okay? So once again, motor, speed, low on your knees, hop, glide, get it back. You're gonna really understand how the foil behaves, the shift in drag when you get out of the water, when the propeller hits the water. These are very, very good exercise to then be able to, what's for your goal, right? Get up and pump and practice pumping. Now, this is not really the tutorial to do that, but I'm gonna still show you pretty much how it's done. So once again, to pump, you accelerate, pick up speed, low on your knees, up, and then you pump. And if you see that you hit the propeller, then you wanna maybe pump harder, hop higher, or maybe your feet placement, most probably actually, is gonna be wrong. Like you said, like you saw, I was pretty inefficient because my feet placement was wrong. My front foot is clearly too far forward, so I'm just gonna adjust consequently so that in the following trial I am most probably gonna be more efficient. So now that I probably have a better feet placement, let's try it again. Again, speed is your speed, so speed is your friend. And now I can actually pump. Again, I think that my feet placement is a little bit off because I'm not efficient, so I'm gonna just try and adjust it once again. Take speed, charge, look forward, hop, pump. Keep it high, keep it high, keep it high. And motor. It's important that you press the trigger before you get in the water, so the transition is smoother. Because if you lose too much speed, then it's very hard to get it back. You're just gonna have too much on-off and you're gonna nosedive most probably. Just gotta do that again. Make sure that your feet placement is correct. More speed. Low. And hop and pump. Look forward and pump. Okay, relieve your weight off the board. If you hear the prop, don't press harder, don't panic, just hop higher, okay? Relieve your weight, shift it in front, and motor away before you hit the water. And that's that. I'm just gonna show you once again the start, but this time I'm actually gonna start from my knees. If you have a big enough board, like I said at the beginning, you can even start directly from this kneeling position, or even from this front foot up position. I'm using the kick, the back kick of the pad with to just stabilize and lock my back foot there. And I'm also gonna use it to pop up. So it's gonna be harder to keep the balance, but easier to get up because you have less steps, right? Because the principle is the same. You keep your hands on the board, you start, you press the trigger, you make sure that you don't nosedive, you accelerate, you make sure that you don't engage the foil before you're up. So maybe you wanna move your front foot further forward once you pick up some speed, if you feel the nose pointing up, okay? And then you pick up speed and you start planing, and then once you plane, you can get up, right? Can you see how I keep my back hand there until I'm nice and stable? And sometimes I even apply pressure on my backhand so that I can position my feet better. I can adjust my feet placement. Now my feet placement was a bit dodgy, so it's hard to stabilize. Okay, now I'm nice balanced with a normal stance, and I'm just gonna once again pick up speed, charge, hop and pump. Okay, my feet placement was off and I was inefficient. So mistake number one is to play around with the trigger too much. Like I said, keep the trigger steady and use your weight, your pressure to stabilize, okay? So I'm still holding the trigger in the same position until I'm up. Then once you're up, you can you can use a little bit more power. But until you are up, do not mess around with the trigger, okay? And even once you are up, if you want to go from board in the water to board out of the water, you can either ask the foil drive more power, more speed, either you can simply slowly switch your front foot more towards the back to relieve some pressure of the nose, okay? Like this.